It's not necessarily the 55-page proposal that necessarily wins the projects. Sometimes it's indeed being in early, even kind of co-author the RFP, being the person of trust, and have a lean 10-page proposal which still wins you a big project.
How do you make sure that you capture market signals to know when an RFP is about to be issued and to get involved sooner? How do you do that?
So there's a lot of, let's say, things around the pure proposal process.
Today's guest is Harald Fritsche, partner and head of Global Treasury Advisory in Germany at Deloitte. He advises companies across industries on all aspects of corporate treasury, from strategy and process optimization to methodology improvements, as well as the selection and implementation of treasury system landscapes.
Invest in the next generation, so not only focus on the head who's maybe in his almost retirement years, but also train your team and focus your team, your senior managers on building relationship on their peer level. As we all know, there needs to be a succession.
The junior treasurers or the junior managers of today are the group treasurers of tomorrow.
Picture a treasurer highly under pressure by the CFO because one of the businesses is not going well. Then a treasurer calls you, he needs support in hours, have people available at short notice, support them over the next 2 weeks. Those are those projects where you build trust. Probably the highest converting one is really referrals. Treasurers move from A to B. You've done a good job here. You can have a good job there.
How do you approach client retention in advisory, Harald?
Yeah, I think it's two key things. One is
welcome to the Principal Podcast, where we talk about how the best professional services firms grow. Whether you're looking to scale your firm or learn from the stories of founders and leaders who've done it, you're in the right place. Join us as we interview the best leaders in professional services. Let's get on with the show. Harald, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Happy to have you.
Jan, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
For the hardcore fans, this is an encore, but for a lot of people, they're discovering you for the first time, Harald. So can you maybe start by quickly introducing you, tell us what you do and what got you into the position that you're in right now?
Of course, quickly starting, my name is Harald, last name Fritsche. I'm a partner at Deloitte. I'm leading here the Global Treasury Advisory services for Deloitte in the German-speaking region. So a big four partner brought me into treasury, you might wonder. Kind of started as an accident almost, I would say. I started business administration and finance, got into an internship at Adidas, the sports brand, in treasury 2005. And it kind of hooked me on the intersection, between finance, tech, decision-making. So I did my bachelor's thesis on currency management, my master's on acquisition financing. So I kind of stayed there and then started my career then at another big four in treasury advisory. And I stayed there kind of until now. Now Deloitte basically being there since 10 years and responsible as partners since 5-6 years now already on the overall team.
Congratulations. It's funny that I am yet to find someone who ended in treasury, not by accident, but then obviously we end up loving it. That's how it goes. So can you tell us a bit more about the specific problem that you solve as the head of the Global Treasury Advisory department at Deloitte in the German-speaking region? And what's the outcome of you helping your clients with that problem? What is it that you do exactly?
Of course, yeah, happy to do so. So I would generally structure it into 4 clusters. One being M&A, treasury activities. Second one is everything around cash, liquidity, payments. The third one is treasury technology. And the third one is, let's say, risk management. On M&A treasury, what do? We support clients in carve-outs, spin-offs, integrations, ensuring day one readiness. Quite some important things. As you can imagine, companies having a huge amount of bank accounts you need to integrate or escalate. You need to make sure that you have your fixed readiness in place. And literally, at the end of the day, we and the client together are in charge that at day one of an M&A deal, clients really get paid, get the money, and then the company's funded. So quite an exciting area in that sense. On liquidity, cash, payments, you can imagine, especially in the current, let's say, economic situation, cash is king again. Yeah, cash is queen nowadays in all those aspects. So everything around global cash visibility, a proper liquidity forecasting, centralized payments, is something really every CFO wants. Yeah, they want to have a credible 12-month rolling forecast. They want to have cash transparency. There's quite some focus on that area as well. Then, of course, treasury technology, and I think we'll get to the whole things of AI a bit down in the podcast as well. Quite interesting. And there's a lot going on. So what do? We support basically end-to-end from a system selection landscape throughout the whole implementation, whether this is S4 Treasury, so SAP, or other leading treasury systems. And then we also start doing like the operate managed service business to kind of take away the burden from the clients as well. And then I said, lastly, also somewhat linked to the current macroeconomics, geopolitics, it's volatile times. Risk management is key, whether this is foreign exchange risk, interest rate risk, but more and more in treasuries on commodity risk, on energy price risk. And then always the question, what's the right strategy from a pure, let's say, economic perspective, but also how we get that in the books. That's typically the problems we solve. And I think important at the end of the day, what is it worth doing it? I mean, yes, you need to have certain duties in terms of financial reporting at the end of the day, but I think if you just make those examples I just did, if you reduce your bank accounts, if you centralize your cash, you significantly ramp down trapped cash positions by hundreds of millions. You have extreme interest expense down with a proper FX management. You have a P&L volatility down. If you have centralized payments, you have fraud risk reduction. You have a quality increase. You have a bank fee reduction. And overall, also to a certain extent, FTE savings. I think all key areas that head of treasury, but especially more and more also the CFO is really, really interested for. So the impact is not soft, it's really quantifiable, and it's really significant at the end of the day.
Thanks for sharing all that, Harald. For the people maybe a bit less familiar with treasury, the way I like to present it is the role of the treasury department is to keep the company liquid. Are we able to do payroll have all the expenditures taken care of and basically have enough cash in the bank to keep the business rolling? And then it's, what do we do with that excess cash? Once we go down the rabbit hole, it's all things related to cash, which is going to become risk management, obviously, foreign exchange when you operate in multiple countries. But at the end of the day, it's really how do we make sure that the company can keep on paying the bills? And there is a much deeper level of complexity, obviously, as we go. But would you say this is a obviously summarized but correct version of what solving big treasury problem means for big companies?
I think it is at the end of the day. Indeed, it is keeping the company able to pay at the end, able to operate, but also able to further invest, expand, have the working capital to do so, and reduce risks. So I think, very well summarized indeed.
Amen. Something I'm a bit curious about now, with obviously, and we're not going to get political, but with everything happening right now, has commodity risk management become a bigger part of your practice, or do you not see any difference with everything happening in the Middle East, specifically with the price of oil and gas?
I mean, that is, of course, let's say one big event that has driven demand and question. But I think it started with the situation in Ukraine already a couple of years back. Sure. Energy prices went through the roof, which really harmed the economy significantly. I think that is when changes happen. But if you look at, for example, volatility in copper prices, they've been going up and down crazily. And if you're, of course, have a big intake of commodity in your value chain, this is quite key. And to your point, yes, we see more and more demand. Let's say in the past, it was more like a procurement topic. You need to make sure that sufficient copper is being purchased and we have it on stock. Now the question is, can we not optimize the price? Hedge the price. We've had recent calls with a client who was purchasing quite some gold. You know how gold price developed, and they need it for the manufacturing process. And now also the question came up: hey, what can we do? We need to hedge it up a little bit longer. That gold price increase really hit us in a way quite unexpected. So indeed, a quite interesting angle.
Yeah, sometimes I forget that gold is also used for manufacturing and building stuff, not just not just as a risk hedge. Can you tell us a bit more about who is it that you serve specifically, Harald? Because obviously, when we hear those big treasury problems, we also heard you say hundreds of millions to manage. So I'm suspect we're not targeting small businesses here. Who is it that you serve specifically? Who do you need to talk to? Who's the decision maker? Like, can you break that down for us, please?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, from a client's perspective, now looking at the German-speaking market, it's the DAX, that's the German, let's say DAX 40, that's the major, like Dow Jones stock index. It's MDAX, which is the mid-sized, but it's also the large, we call in Germany Mittelstand, so the mid-sized, privately owned, but typically also big. So I say everything above 3-5 billion of revenue is something we would be looking into across sectors. So we do industrials, automotive, energy, pharma, retail, tech. So no specification in that area. What we don't do is banks. That is a bit different. But let's say everything across the industry, we do. On the question, I mean, whom are we selling to? And that has also been changed over time, I would say. I mean, of course, it is the treasurer or head of treasury, group treasurer in most organizations. And there are organizations out there which are really big, also from a corporate finance treasury perspective, where we even have an entry point one level below, like a head of systems, head of projects, head of operations in really big organizations. But typically it's the treasurer, especially when it's a core topic for his area. But more and more we see the office of the CFO transformation projects, where the CFO wants to drive topics across the full CFO function, not in treasury specifically, not only in controlling, not in accounting, not in tax, but jointly, to have a joint vision along that area. So whenever it's more strategic, it's the CFO playing a big role. I was mentioning earlier, we do quite a lot on the M&A perspective. That's typically when CFO and the M&A office comes into play. But we also have aspects which are a bit more regulatory, accounting, IFRS driven, where you then also have besides treasury accounting involved. Yeah, so that's kind of the things. And then also, if it's technology, IT is more and more important. And that is on the one hand side from how we get in, but it's also of how projects are typically successful. If you have all the stakeholders involved, it's from a selling perspective an important topic to see what are the key stakeholders, but at the same time, from a delivery perspective, the right thing. And especially, you need to have a different language if you speak to different stakeholders, right? I mean, you just mentioned, you need to explain treasury a bit different to an audience that's not so much aware of. At the same time, if we speak to a head of IT, we don't talk about treasury and hedging. We talk about infrastructure and how it integrates into ERP landscape. If we talk about with accounting, we talk about an audit-proof setup that is compliant, right? So it's really a different angle. It sounds obvious. It sounds clear, straightforward. But it is sometimes the small differentiator that makes a difference between the approaches.
I'm going to piggyback on this because obviously this is where I wanted to go as well, Harald. It sounds easy, but it's because you broke it down very clearly. I think having such clarity first around who needs to be involved in the sales cycle, but also afterwards, like, hey, if we want this to be successful, we anyways need to have the right people involved. Yep. So I guess my double-clicking question here is, how do you, from the get-go, one, know who you're going to need to involve in the decision-making process? Mm-hmm. You mentioned IT. I'm thinking head of tax, head of legal, if you end up doing some like cash pooling in certain regions. How do you identify from the get-go who needs to be involved? And then how do you, in your sales cycle, Harald, make sure that you pull those people in, not only to say, hey, this is what we're going to do and this is how we make it successful together, but also like, hey, this is how it will help you, and kind of getting their buy-in. So when they discuss internally with the group treasurers, they're like, no, we need to go with those guys. They know what they're talking about. So how do you think about all this? How do you identify, and then how do you get the buy-in of those people?
Yeah. I mean, what we indeed typically do very early, we call it like an opportunity identification stage. once we say, hey, this is a valid opportunity, we're going to want to go for it if we think about an RFP situation. And I think we'll get to that maybe a bit later. Well, if you only get to know about a project when you receive an RFP, it's maybe not the best way of or the best strategy. But taking that as an example, nonetheless, we kind of do indeed a stakeholder assessment and then look at it. What are the key decision makers typically? Because as I said earlier, it differs from project to project, from client to client, but we really see who are the influencers, who are the decision makers, and see where do we have contact from a Deloitte organization perspective. Where have we done projects in the past? Whom do we know from events? Whom have we participated in a survey and the like? Yeah, and we really kind of strategically think about who approaches whom. So it's not necessarily me always being the guy who's then trying to pick up the phone and call the IT guy if my colleague has recently done a project. Right? So it's quite a big network thing we do then internally of having that tackled properly.
I love this. I'm going to put a pin on this, and I'm going to get back to it because that's a very interesting piece of the sales cycle. Before we even get there, Harald, in a specialized field like Treasury Advisory, how do you get people to find out about you and what you guys do? How do you get people to, before they issue the RFP, they think about you and they're like, let's start having a chat with Harald and his team to see if this is a fit for them? How do you, and obviously I suspect that the Deloitte brand behind it helps all this, but in your very specialized fields that very few people in the world, know about, how do you get the right people's attention?
Well, as you rightly said, and I like to put it that way, Deloitte brand and Deloitte reputation definitely gets us on the long list. The actual decision is made on people, right? So my role kind of is to turn kind of that company reputation into a personal trust kind of thing. And basically, this is done mainly via 4 channels. I would say one is, well, overall, this all goes with, let's say, building your team's brand. As you rightly said, the market is relatively small. People know each other. Everyone talks to each other. So it's building reputation over time. But it is speaking opportunities. So I've spoken at Eurofinance, Structured Finance, the German Association of Treasurers, various vendor user groups and the like. So being really always present at the market, not on that sales mode, but really adding that added value in terms of new content, new ideas, new visions that you have. We always try to be on the market with new publications, whether this is point of views on innovation, whether this is regulatory topics, whether this is benchmarking things, whether this is a global treasury survey we run. So having always material thought leadership available. The third one, and this is probably the highest converting one, is really referrals. Treasurers move from A to B. Junior treasury managers move from A to B, from one company to the other. You've done a good job here, you can have a good job there. So basically, that's a bit the way it goes. And as said, this is typically the highest referral you have when you have a personal recommendation or a credential, as we say, from similar clients. And then it's also quite interestingly like the alumni network, where we have former people from ourselves. The team is growing, but nonetheless, you lose some people over time that don't want to do that consulting work over and over again. Mm-hmm. So it's also a good thing that we have. So kind of consistency, I would say, pays back. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think we will get to that later. But at the end of the day, one important thing is deliver well on a consistent level.
It's funny because I took notes whilst you were talking about it. I was like, okay, but how do you build trust and a reputation? I think this boils down to what you just said here, delivering a good work consistently. And then obviously talking about it, speaking engagements and so on. One of the, to kind of go a bit down the rabbit hole here, one of the challenges that I see consulting firms facing at some point is that everybody wants to work with the founder, the owner, the CEO, the managing partner of the specific department, because they are the ones who built the reputation and the trust in the market. So my question to you, Harald, would be, how do you double down on this? Obviously, we have Deloitte, but people buy from people. So how do I build the reputation and the trust of my team and of myself? But then how do you get clients to come to you and not be like, no, Harald, I'm down, but we are doing this with you and with you only? How do you get the senior manager specialized in trade finance to have people wanting to work with them specifically? How do you get a manager specialized in FIS implementation to work with them specifically? How do you think about that for your team, to have like the spotlight on them as well, and for companies being fully on board, working with your team and not necessarily always you directly? How do you think about that?
I mean, for me personally, honestly, that was a learning curve along the career, I would say, and it needs to come with being able to step back, step out of the spotlight, and put trust in your team. Yeah, the team is strong. Your let's say medium level leaders are strong, as you rightly said. They're the experts in trade finance. They're the expert in a specific system. They're the expert in accounting. They're probably more expert than I am in certain areas, right? And I think it is really that I think step out of the spotlight. It's okay, yeah, to do that. It's more like a personal mindset shift that you need to have. And on the other hand, convince the client and having then an open conversation on that. Say, look, that's the expert. I have full trust in him that he delivers a great project. If not, I'm always there. You can always call me if something goes wrong, but I really have full trust in that person. And that typically always pays off, having that conversation. I mean, you always have those clients that call you for certain areas because you worked with them since 20 years. That is actually working over the years better than I would have always expected. So yeah, personally step back, which sounds a bit hard in the first place, but it's just the right thing to do, right? I mean, the role kind of changes from being a delivery expert, to managing a team, managing a service offering, managing clients, managing relationships, and a lot of other things than your delivery.
Yeah. Side note, this is something I'm going through in my personal journey right now. I'm learning to, I wouldn't say let go, but like, as you say, step back and trusting that the people that you've trained for many, many years are going to do a good job. And most of the time they were just waiting for you to like, can you step the hell back, please? But it's sometimes a bit hard. So I feel you.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, so coming back to the sales cycles, Harald, a few things that I want us to double down on. So one of the things that you mentioned is that you're not always the one picking up the phone. Obviously, having a large network like Deloitte with multiple partners who have some entry points might help. I suspect that you still have very long sales cycles, right? We're not talking about working with the top German companies and international companies without long sales cycles. So how do you navigate this? How do you organize sales cycles that can last 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 months even, with the level of high ticket that we're talking about here, all whilst planning the right resources and making sure that when we have the go, we are able to allocate the right resources? How do you think about all this, those very long sales cycles?
Yeah. I mean, maybe to start with a bit of a engagement range, indeed, as you already said. I mean, our engagement range from, let's say, relatively quick assessment, which is like 2, 3, 4 weeks. We need multi-year, 7-figure transformations, technology, people, what have you, right? Yeah. So it is quite different depending on the project type. If we now, for example, and that's quite interesting, look at all those treasury M&A related aspects. Those sales cycles are typically relatively fast, although they are big projects. Nonetheless, pressure's on. Typically, there's a capital market deadline somewhere approaching, so decision cycles are in weeks. Yeah. And then indeed, we have those more intrinsically motivated treasury transformations that nowadays more and more need to have a certain business case underlying the transformation, where you have sales cycles from 3 to 12 months. Yeah, fully right. And I mean, it is our daily business, and say let's managing team and managing availabilities, which is not an easy thing. And I think it comes down to, once again, we mentioned earlier, there's always various stakeholders involved, right? So you don't typically only sell to one person, you sell to a buying group, you sell to treasurer, CFO, head of treasury IT, and so on and so forth. And having that network of from a Deloitte perspective to the client, you typically, although the sales cycles is relatively long, you get an idea of, well, how long it is and why it is. It's not like you get an initial RFP and they plan to decide in 8 weeks and it takes 10 months. That's typically not how it happens. It's typically, there's a lot of pre-RFP preparation workshops here and there. So you have initial contacts and so on. So you get a sense of when a decision might occur. So it's not like that you need to manage your team and availabilities over a 12-month period. But yes, there is certain uncertainty where you need to do prioritization across clients, have more flexible working models. We work also, of course, in our global delivery network to kind of buffer peaks that we have. I think we'll get to that later on as well. New technology arising, which might help to get certain things started. So yeah, I think that's roughly how we see it. And maybe also interesting, it's not necessarily the 55-page proposal that necessarily wins the projects. Sometimes it's indeed being in early, even kind of co-author the RFP, being the person of trust, and have a lean 10-page proposal, which still wins you a big project. So there's a lot of, let's say, things around the pure proposal process.
And so the proposal, obviously, how much sense it makes, pricing is going to be important. I think at the end of the day, as you mentioned before, people are going to be at the center of this all. Like more or less the same budget, more or less the same pricing, more or less the same service. A client will go for a provider rather than another because they have a good relationship with them. So to maybe piggyback on one of the things you mentioned earlier, how do you make sure that you build those relationships before the RFP is issued? How do you get involved into those pre-RFP workshops versus, sitting in the office and receiving the RFP and being in competition with the other big fours or the other teams like this? How do you make sure that you capture market signals to know when an RFP is about to be issued and to get involved sooner? How do you do that?
Well, I mean, getting those market signals is a difficult exercise. I think it overall comes. I mean, it's difficult to get into a pre-RFP discussion if you've never worked with the client before, or if you don't know the client. Let's put it that way. And then it all comes with trust. Again, so it's really a question of whether they see you as their partner or just one partner of many, and always stay engaged. And that's what I meant with earlier. Invite them to conferences. That whole, let's say, relationship building. I think that is key, really, to be closely involved and engaged, and that is typically what, at the end of the day, also from my experience, works best, because it is fairly difficult. I mean, there are occasions, of course, and let's say you get that sentiment, indirect information, rumors sometimes, from the market that, hey, there's a big RFP coming. Or on the M&A, you have, of course, like merger markets and merger watch. There's there's rumors out there as well. And then, of course, you try to kind of get into contact. But again, if you've not been into contact before, it's difficult to have that, let's say, trusted relationship, to have a trustful conversation before an official RFP. So it typically starts,
makes sense,
years back.
No, it makes sense. And I like what you said around it's tough if you haven't worked with the client already or if they don't know you. How do you think about, or how do you approach client retention in advisory, Harold? We mentioned, projects ranging from 2 to 3 weeks, kind of quick assessments, to multi-layered, multi-year, 7 figures projects. How do you think about retention? Because at the end of the day, the question I always have is, we're talking about transformation. So once the department is transformed, what happens? So how do you think about recurring business, reoccurring business, maybe? How do you navigate all this?
That's a very good point. And it comes back to what we said earlier, deliver well. I think there's no retention strategy surviving bad delivery. And as you rightly said, stay engaged, or I would start with be engaged. There are consultancy firms where, the partners are mainly in a sales relationship position, not necessarily engaged during the project. That's what we and my team try to do different. But then it is also what you said, typically you say you did your transformation completed successfully, work done, next client. True, but we really try to stay engaged between projects. We call without an agenda. We send relevant benchmarks. As said, we invite them to round tables. We provide them with thought leadership. And be there in those, we call them those moments that really matter. 2 examples for that. One from a professional perspective. Picture a treasurer highly under pressure by the CFO because one of the businesses is not going well, whether clients not paying, business not going well, financing under pressure, what's on and so forth. And the treasurer calls you, he needs support in hours, he needs someone to trustworthy structure the next 2-3 weeks, structure project approach internally, externally, have people available at short notice, support them over the next 2 weeks. Those are those, that's not the projects where you make big amounts of money, to be honest. That's the projects where you build trust. And the second perspective, and that is very rarely talked about, but it is that the personal perspective. There are always situations, when the treasurer, someone of the team has health issues, situations in the family, whatever it is, just be human. Send a card, don't pressure on deadlines when it's not the right occasion to do so. As said, it sounds obvious, but from my experience over the last 20 years now, this is really also quite a differentiating factor. At the end of the day, you're talking to a human being and not just a role and a CFO and a head of someone, but it's really that human relationship that you have. And maybe 3 more points to that. One is, which I believe is important, invest in the next generation. So not only focus on the head of, who's maybe in his almost retirement years, but also, and not necessarily by myself, but kind of train your team and focus your team, your senior managers on building relationship on their peer level. As we all know, there needs to be a succession. Be honest to certain things. So I had clients in the past who wanted to do a big transformation in a certain area, now recently on AI. And I honestly told them, it's a nice project. I would love to do it. But honestly, guys, you're not there yet. Your IT transformation is not there yet. Your data quality is not there yet. I would love to do the project, but I will not propose because I believe this is not gonna be right. Or at the same time, if you believe that you don't have the right quality and capacity, give that honest feedback. It just pays off over time. And then in consultancy, last but not least, sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, right? Lose with grace. Don't be frustrated. Don't be offensive. Don't blame someone outside or whatever. There might be reasons you will never understand. They might not be objective. They might not be fully fair. Send a gracious note, have a conversation, stay in contact. Long-term relationships are the currency. And from my perspective, that pays off very well. Clients typically always get back, whether it's from the same project that is not going well or an additional project. That's really, really important along the line.
You're making my job way easier, Harald. I was going to double down on a few things and you nailed them down yourself. So I love it. And the one thing I'm still going to double down on, because I think you alluded to it a couple of times in the episode here, but something that you said earlier was the junior treasurers or the junior managers of today are the group treasurers of tomorrow. And it's not just when the group treasurers moves from one company to another that he or she brings their consultants, favorite consultants with them. It's also someone you've worked with or someone from your team has worked with Chloris for 2 to 3 years, who gets promoted or who gets into another company and who then is the foot in the door for big transformation projects. So all of this, and one of the things I've learned running my own business is the more long-term thinker you are, the more likely you are to win. And those small projects that you mentioned of 2 to 3 weeks, which are actually the ones where you show that you're going to be there in the tough moments, are the ones who help you get the long-term project afterwards. What and lose with grace? I've noted this one down as well. It's great. Maybe to kind of wrap this interview, Harald, two things I want to ask you. One, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see in the space, in your practice, obviously, whatever you feel comfortable sharing? And on the other side of the coin, and maybe it's going to be two sides of the same coin, what are some big opportunities that you see in your space in the coming 3 to 6 months?
And I think it is kind of a two sides to a coin. One is the internal side, one is the external side. Not all of them. And maybe keeping everything geopolitical out of that discussion, which no one here, I think, can properly judge. But if you look now in, let's say for me, and maybe it's a 3 to 6 month or 3 to 12, 24 to be seen, but I think it's two key things. One is talent and one is indeed AI. Let's say Treasury Advisory is a small team, rare profiles. The corporates compete hard again for the talent. The young generation has some different expectations. It's a challenging role between finance, between capital markets, between technology, and the new talent also needs to spend 5-10 years to really master that consultancy expertise. And there's less and less talent coming up. So that is a challenge we face, and I hear from a lot of discussions with my peer treasury guys. So also in the corporate world, same thing. The second one, I think, is everything on AI. I mean, speed of change and frightening almost.
I feel you.
And exciting at the same time, right? So I think it will be very interesting to see how that AI comes in. It will definitely be changing the way we work. We already see it now, all the simple tasks of researching, preparing slide masters, drafting, target operating model and the like. I mean, AI has progressed so fast. That will be changing quite a lot. And will, on the other side, from a client perspective, do the same things, right? So it will also be an interesting thing, which will, I believe, at the end of the day, also change. At least if you look at consultancy, we used to have that classical pyramid. We had partners, directors, and then we had a lot of analysts, consultants at the bottom. And we look at it that this will more change towards kind of a diamond structure, that we have more like a middle layer of managers, experience, they run the projects, they have seen a lot, but there's less on the junior level required, where you then of course wonder, well, where does the new leadership then develop from? And then you have, from the other perspective, also the global delivery perspectives coming in, where the pressure also from our client is always high on there needs to be more offshore, there needs to be more nearshore, there needs to be lower prices. So I think those three are very much interlinked, from talent, AI, global delivery. And honestly, if anyone in the audience has cracked it, how this will work out, I'd like to really, really hear from that. I mean, honestly, we have a lot of discussions on that, of how this will change our way of working. Like no one can fully see, and we don't have that crystal ball in front of us. But I think that is what we see. And at the end of the day, I think that's also what my clients are looking at. The whole technology thing is really important. They need to move quickly. But as I mentioned earlier, a lot of them have that pressure, hey, you need to apply AI. but the foundational work has not been done. So there's no data to plug AI on. That's one. The second one is also everything will be more real-time payments, real-time hedging, real-time, you have it, higher level of automation. So also I think the team structure from a corporate treasury or the CFO agenda will be changing quite a lot. Now will also not look the same. But I think the important and interesting thing, and that's why I think treasury will be a great area to work with in the future as well, is all those areas put treasury more and more into a strategic role, being closer connected to the CFO, to M&A, to all those functions. And it will be an interesting journey, I think, in the next 3, 6, 12, 24 months of how that will change. And I think that the speed of adoption needs to be a lot faster than it used to be in the past. And that, I think, will be a challenge for the consulting part, but also for the clients.
Harald, I want to ask you so many more questions on the topic, but I feel there would be enough for another entire episode. So who knows, maybe we'll have an encore.
Why not?
But Harald, this was gold. Thank you so much. If people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you just Google Deloitte, Harald Fritsche, and you will find my profile also on the Deloitte homepage and on, as said, social media such as LinkedIn.
We'll put all the links in the description. Harald, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Guillaume, thank you very much. And thanks everyone for listening in, and have a great day.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Principal Podcast. We hope you learned valuable strategies to grow your firm and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.